One of the absolute worst parts of playing a game or making a game is when you encounter bugs. So on today's TerraGenesis Dev Diary, let's talk about bugs. A bug is basically any problem in a piece of software. There are other things that can affect it, like viruses and worms, but generally, bugs come in three categories. The first, and the easiest to understand, is just a typo. When you're writing code, oftentimes there are autocompletes and different things that are used to make it easier to write code, and sometimes it just gets it wrong, or you make a mistake. If you're changing the background color of something and you type BL and it starts to autocomplete, and so you just hit enter, and it autocompleted black instead of blue, that's a bug. Typos are obviously the easiest kind of bug to fix, although you do have to figure out where in the code that is, which is not always obvious. And that's because, unlike a lot of types of bugs, typos, the computer often doesn't know that that is a bug. Developers have a lot of systems that help them figure out where bugs are happening and how to fix them. But if you just set the background to black instead of blue, the system thinks that you meant black. It doesn't know that that's a bug, and so it can be hard to figure out exactly where it's happening. The second type of bug is a compatibility issue, and this is something that affects any piece of software that has to run on more than one kind of machine. A game that you can play on PC, Xbox, PlayStation, and mobile is going to have a lot more opportunities for compatibility issues than a game that you can only play on iPhones. Compatibility issues also vary a lot by platform. Love them or hate them, Apple is a control freak company. All of their phones and all of their tablets have very similar architectures, and iOS is pretty much the same on any device. Compare that to Android, where there are literally thousands of different phones and tablets and OS versions. There's a lot of room for compatibility issues on Android, whereas on iOS, they keep it pretty tight. And like I said, the more platforms that you support, the more likely you are to run into a compatibility issue. We had a lot of compatibility issues when we switched TerraGenesis over to Windows, because we had built the whole thing for mobile devices. It assumed that you were playing on a touchscreen. And so we had to adjust a lot of the UI to support the idea of a mouse and keyboard. But the biggest source of bugs, the main kind of bug, is a logic error. This is something where you wrote some instructions that seemed like they made sense, but when the computer actually went through them, it didn't produce the result that you intended. To illustrate the idea of a logic error, I often use the example of a traffic light. If you ask the average person, how does a traffic light work? They'll usually say something like, first it turns on the green light, and then the yellow light, and then the red light, and then it repeats. But if you follow those instructions precisely, you're going to get a traffic light that just goes and turns on the green, turns on the yellow, turns on the red, and now they're all on, just instantly. That's not how a traffic light works. So the first step is you say, okay, well, you don't turn them all on instantly. First, you have to put pauses between them. You have to turn on the green light, and then you turn on the yellow light, and then you turn on the red light, and then you repeat. But again, you're just gonna get green on, yellow on, red on. You never told it to turn off. So you think, okay, let's refine our traffic light code a little more. Turn on the green light, wait a little while, turn off the green light. Turn on the yellow light, wait a little while, turn off the yellow light. Turn on the red light, wait a little while, turn off the red light, repeat. But of course, you haven't synced it with the traffic light going perpendicular to that. You can go on and on and on with even something as simple as a traffic light, and you can find kind of layers of assumptions and misunderstandings that you had in how this kind of thing would go down. And so when you have a system as complex as a video game, there are a lot of times where you realize, what I actually meant was... And that brings us to the main thing that you need for fixing bugs, and that is reproducibility. Whenever we get a report from any player playing TerraGenesis and they report a bug, the first thing we always ask them is, okay, how do you reproduce it? How do you make it happen? If you wanted to make that bug happen, what would be the steps required to do that? Once we have those steps and we can reproduce it on our end, then it becomes pretty easy to figure out, oh, okay, that's why it's doing that. Here's where the problem is, and then you can go in and fix it. The problem comes if you can't reproduce it. Oftentimes, this is because of a compatibility issue. It turns out that this bug only happens on Samsung phones and you have iPhones, or this only happens on tablets and you have phones, or, different platforms, different situations. Maybe it only happens on a very specific version of the OS because they fixed the problem, but the player doesn't know that and they haven't updated their phone in a while. Talk to any developer and they'll tell you that they've probably got dozens of bugs that they believe are happening, they just can't reproduce it. And so there's not a lot that they can do, because without reproducing it, they can't debug it. Now, like I said, developers have a lot of tools at their disposal. If there's one thing programmers love doing, it's making tools to help them do their job easier. And we at Edgeworks are no exception to that rule. We have a system that we developed in-house called Hestia, which allows us to connect the player's device back to our system. And it reports a ton of diagnostic information, error reports, crash logs, anything that it can gain to help us fix a bug as the player is reporting it. Hestia has been a huge help to fixing bugs in TerraGenesis, and we are improving it all the time. But even so, the most important part of any bug report comes from the player, the people who are experiencing it and can describe what is happening and how to reproduce it. With that piece, we have been able to fix so many bugs. There are seriously probably dozens or hundreds of bugs in TerraGenesis that are fixed and not a problem anymore, specifically because of the efforts of our players. It is so awesome. It's one of my very favorite things when players get into the idea of a bug hunt. They're not developers, they don't know how to fix it, but they'll pour through the game and bend the rules and do everything they can to try to figure out why a bug is happening to help us fix it. Obviously, having a bug is never something that you hope for, but when you do have a bug in your game, and you will always have bugs in your game, having a user base that likes to help you fix it and is supportive and collaborative in those fixes is the greatest thing any indie developer could ask for. That's it for this week's Dev Diary. I've been posting polls each week in the TerraGenesis fan group asking what I should talk about next week, and I'll be posting another one soon, so be sure to keep an eye out for it. In the meantime, be sure to hit subscribe and hit the bell so that you're notified about all our upcoming videos. We've got these Dev Diaries, we've got Slice of Science and the Synthesis, and we've got a bunch of cool new stuff coming out soon. And lastly, I want to give a big shout out to our Patreon supporters. You are the reason we can continue to do this. So if you want to help support Edgeworks Entertainment and TerraGenesis and all of our other content, go to patreon.com/edgeworksentertainment. We've got a bunch of cool rewards, including shout-outs here on the show. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and as always, happy terraforming.